All right, welcome to the Undercover Adventure Podcast. I'm Chad Christopher, and today we're going to talk to Dr. Dirk Davidson. Dr. Davidson is an oncologist here in Crossville, Tennessee, and he also is an avid whitewater kayaker and slalom kayaker. He's actually raced in the slalom circuit in the DC area and some of the other parts of the United States, and has competed up until when he decided to pursue medicine as a career. And then we talked about his outdoor hobbies, his family, and just kind of how he mixes the professional pursuits with his own whitewater passion. So hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Do you know Kirk Edelman?
I've met Kirk, yeah.
Kirk was in here. We did a podcast with Kirk a couple weeks ago.
Huh.
Yeah. He's talking about his guidebooks and just some of his adventures.
He's a great writer.
He is. He's awesome.
A good writer.
Yeah, so Dr. Dirk Davidson, I'll just do like a brief introduction. So you're an oncologist. You've been a practicing oncologist here in Crossville, Tennessee for
20 plus.
And then moonlighting on the side as you've been a slalom competitor for a few years, and then you're also a whitewater kayaker in some of the surrounding areas on the Cumberland Plateau.
I'm not much of a kayaker anymore. But I am buying a new kayak.
Okay, that's all that matters, right? You got the next one on
I got it on the car.
Awesome. So how did you get started in whitewater?
I grew up in West Virginia, and my father and one of his friends were kind of the early explorers of the state, and they wrote what was really the initial guidebook to whitewater, which was called Wildwater, West Virginia. They published that in the early 70s. And so he was really an avid paddler and pretty, well known, like maybe nationally, but certainly in the East as a person that was really into paddling. And he and his friend were also good writers, and so they just took it upon themselves. They had this idea that we'll just go to all the rivers and we'll describe them. And so I did a little bit of paddling with him in a C2, two-man canoe.
Okay.
Usually just kind of forced to do it and, hated it. It was cold, and I had to kneel the whole time, and it was just kind of miserable. And then when I was about 15 years old, I'd broken up with a girlfriend. And so I had this free time. And he said, let's go kayaking. And I said, okay, if I have to. And we went the first day on a river called the Cranberry River, and it was very low. So it required a lot of maneuvering. There was plenty of water to get down the river, but if you didn't know how to kayak, it was problematic. And I think I flipped about, and of course I didn't know how to roll. I barely knew how to paddle. I flipped about 3 times in the first mile, and it was 30 to, it was around freezing. And we didn't have wetsuits or anything, so I was just absolutely miserable. And there was a little road beside the river. And the wives, this was a big trip. And so it was mostly, these men that were 30 to 50, and then me, the one kid. And the wives were driving along. This was going to be a full weekend of kayaking. The wives were driving beside us.
Just watching the show?
Yeah, just watching the show. And one of them came out and yelled out, anybody want hot chocolate? And I was like, yeah, I want hot chocolate. And I didn't know how to ferry back across to where they were. So I tried to, and of course I flipped one more time, got out, and was just so relieved and, got warm and had the hot chocolate and thought, well, that's it. I did it. This is stupid. I'm never going to do it again. And the next day we went to the Elk River, and we were in Webster Springs. And I remember the put-in was right in town. It was a nicer day. It was actually kind of warm. And the put-in was sort of on a little island, it seemed like. It was a flat area by the river. And we were parked there, and, they were all milling around and talking and setting up shuttle and slowly getting dressed. And there were some kids there playing basketball. And I said, well, I can do that. And so I really just kind of hid and thought, I'm not going kayaking. And I had, I think, 35 cents in my pocket. And I was imagining how I was going to get through this full day and not starve. And I was thinking about what I would buy at the little grocery store there. And I would just play basketball all day and just sit there and wait. And my dad, who was, kind of on the spectrum a little bit, like he just didn't pay much attention. Then he finally realized I wasn't dressed. And he goes, "What are you doing? You're not dressed." And I said, "I'm playing basketball." He goes, "No, you're not. You're going paddling again. Get your clothes on." And I was like, "Oh, God, another day of swimming in the cold." And so I got dressed and went down. And as I said, it was warmer. It might have been 50 that day. It was pretty nice. It was in late March. And I got in the boat, and you had to go about 100 or 200 yards till you got to a bridge right there in town. And there were people on that bridge, and they were cheering. and there was plenty of water in the river. And I went that 100 or 200 yards, and I saw those admiring spectators, and I thought, this isn't bad. This is kind of fun. Yeah, I must be kind of cool. I can kayak down this river. These people are cheering for me. And it was an 11-mile trip, and I did swim, I think, one time. But even as I got to that bridge, I had an about-face epiphany and said, I like this.
So that was the day that
I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
This is cool. This is really fun. And I remember we got off the river and we were heading back home, which was a few hours away. And I was already doing the math as to how many times I'd flipped per mile and how much better my average was getting. So the first day it was 4 times in a mile, and the second day was just 1 time in 11 miles. And I thought, I can make that better. I'm going to do this better. And literally, from then on, I was a kayaker. I mean, I just started kayaking all the time. Just grew to love it. Of course, it was all with my dad early on, but within about a year, we had a group of young people, and we got our driver's license, and then we started kayaking, and our parents didn't even care. And we were 16 years old. We were driving out of state. We were going kayaking. That's just what we did, and it was really, it was it really changed my life. It really gave me this other thing. I was pretty academic. I was a good student, and I had plans to do, something big in my life. I didn't say to myself, I'm going to be a full-time kayaker. I said, I'm going to do something good, but I'm also going to do this kayaking. And, even that summer, it was March when I started kayaking. That summer, I got a job as a safety boater for a raft company.
Nice.
And I still couldn't roll. So that was kind of weird.
Problematic.
I'm supposed to save people, and I'm really worried about saving myself. And then I learned to roll that summer, and it just kind of went from there.
So when did you set your sights on? Because you were a competitor for a while in the slalom circuit.
I think the first time I was in a slalom might have been that next fall.
Okay.
And, probably wasn't very good, and then started doing that regularly. And this was in the early days when people started doing hard stuff. So we didn't have plastic boats. Our boats were the same as the racers. We pirated the molds. We always had at least one mold around our house.
Did you make your own boat?
We made our own boats. And I remember it used to cost about $100. You could maybe do it for less to build a boat, to buy the materials and lay it up, and it would take you about a weekend. The seaming was the hard part, but just making the boat, the 2 halves, was pretty easy, and anybody could kind of learn to do it. But about that time, people started doing harder stuff. And I would look at a lot of that and go, I don't know. It's so fun to just kayak, and doing the harder stuff, you might get killed. And it didn't really seem like the best people were doing the hardest stuff. It kind of seemed like the wilder personalities, the people with maybe a bigger chip on their shoulder trying to prove something, who didn't really want to learn finesse.
Mm-hmm.
They just wanted to say, I ran that. And so about this time I thought, well, that's not measurable.
Mm-hmm.
That's just people bragging. That's just a picture or video. And, it wasn't what it became. Or now, I mean, the people that run the best stuff are just fantastic paddlers. They weren't back then.
Right.
They were just
Hucking themselves.
kind of ballsy and crazy. So for that reason, slalom seemed to me more like a sport. And then, that year, that summer was the first Olympics for kayaking. And I think that changed a whole generation of kids. Like they suddenly looked at that and said, that's what we're going to do because that's the real sport. That's in the Olympics. And so, slalom kind of grew a lot during that time. There was a kid at the time, 19 years old, from Washington, D.C. His name is Jamie McEwen. His brother was a good paddler. His mom was actually a pretty good paddler. And he won the bronze medal in the C1 division at the Olympics. And that just, suddenly, particularly the D.C. kids, they not only knew what they wanted to do, but they knew somebody who had achieved a bronze medal. And they could see him. They could talk to him and paddle with him. So, and then about the same time, the movie Deliverance came out, which really broadened the appeal of how cool Whitewater was.
Mm-hmm.
And so that brought in a lot of people that just thought it was cool and wanted to do it and wanted to be Burt Reynolds and, do difficult Whitewater. So it was a pretty exciting time. I ended up, by my senior year in high school, I was doing it all the time, and my friends and I built a little course. It was just on flat water on a creek in Morgantown, West Virginia, where we lived. And so we would go there and practice. We had slalom gates hanging, and we would just try to practice. And I was much more into it than my friends. They would go some. I would go like every day that I could after school. It was kind of weird because the course was literally right over the hill from my high school. But for me to go there, I had to hitchhike from the high school across town, get my mother's car, put the boat on it, and drive right back to where I'd come from, which I hated. I just thought, this is a big waste of time. I got to figure out a way I can stash the boat down here and just go over the hill and practice after high school. And then when I went to college, my father had been the physician for the national team in 1973. It was in Switzerland.
That's cool.
And so he got to know everyone. And it just so happened that the Olympic coach, whose son was the hero in kayak in the country, his name was Eric Evans, his father was Jay Evans. His father was also on the admissions board for Dartmouth College. And Dartmouth College had Ledyard Canoe Club, which everybody knew as the best racers in the country. They had multiple national champions. They had people that would go there specifically to do that. They had some people that weren't really kayakers, and they would go to Dartmouth, and then it was such an intense program that they would become very successful racers nationally. So I knew that's where I wanted to go to school. And, thinking about it now, coming out of a public high school in West Virginia, the odds of getting into that school were probably pretty low. I think there were 2 West Virginians in my class. But anyway, so I got in. I was able to go there. And And then I was around other people who were better than me and really serious. And so it just kind of became what I did all through college.
So let's pause and shift gears and then go back to the medical side of things. So you went to Dartmouth for, what was your major?
Psychology.
Okay. So when did you decide, like, I want to pursue medicine, I want to pursue oncology?
There was a lot of family push.
Okay.
And it wasn't so much like, oh, be a doctor. That's so acclaimed. It was more the idea of you have to do something to serve the world. And do you think bankers serve the world? No, they don't serve the world. The only people that serve the world are doctors. And so that was just sort of, I was, manipulated, and probably more by my mother. My father, he was off kayaking himself. He just assumed I would do something, and he didn't really push it. But yeah, it became the idea that, the only thing you can do if you're a smart kid that's worth doing is becoming a physician. It was like anything else I would think of. I mean, my real dream when I was in high school, I thought, I know my dream job. I'm going to be a statistician for a college basketball team. I'm going to sit there at the games and say, oh, missed shot, okay, assist. I thought that'd be so fun. It'd be really easy, and I like numbers. That was really appealing to me. And actually, I was thinking about pursuing math when I got to college. And it was only when I took calculus that I realized, oh, I'm like the dumb kids in high school were with algebra. Like now that I'm in calculus, I know that people with a little better brain than me can see this. They can just see it. They don't need to memorize anything. It's just natural to them. And I realized I wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
And it was really a good thing because I don't know what the hell I would have done as a mathematician. So I decided right then, no, I'm not going to be a mathematician. And then I ended up working as an orderly. Just one summer I was home and, just looking for a job. So I went and worked as an orderly at the hospital, and I watched the young doctors round, and it was on orthopedics. So, it wasn't exactly, rocket science. And I listened to them talk to each other in the hall when they would discuss patients. And I thought to myself, yeah, I can be a doctor. These guys aren't real, they're just not super smart. Yeah, this is easy. Okay. Yeah, okay, I'll do this. And then I finished up and, got all my prerequisites before I got out of college. And
so for people that don't understand, like, what's broadly define what oncology is?
So oncology is just the treating of cancer. So if a person has cancer, it might be something that can be removed surgically, and that's the best. It might be something that can't be removed but can be radiated. And then very often what we call systemic treatment comes into play. So if the cancer is spread, then we need to give something to the patient that affects all the areas. You can't cut them all out. So you need to give something that'll kill all the areas. And that could be chemotherapy in the vein. It could be chemo or other treatments orally. It could, in the last 10 or so years, immunotherapy, which is given like chemotherapy typically in the vein. And sometimes those treatments are given after a tumor is removed based on the biology of the tumor and the suggestion that, oh, this probably has already spread, even though we can't see it. It probably is already in the bones too, so we better give something now and maybe we can kill it forever. So it's a kind of a mix of those.
At what point in your, when you went to school for psychology, like when did you decide I'm going to pursue medicine and I'm going to specifically, like when did you specifically decide that you wanted to pursue oncology?
I decided that I was going to go into medicine, I think, after my junior year.
Okay.
So I was, thinking more about kayaking and just trying to do well in school, but I wasn't really worried about what the future held. And then I worked as an orderly, and then I thought, yeah, I like this. I like when the people need your help and you can go and help. I mean, that was a big part of it was, that this is real. Like they're in some distress, and you know, we as healthcare team can help them. They're not just whiners on the street; they're actually sick. So, so that's when I decided that. And then I was really uncertain about what I wanted to do again when I got out of med school. Had no idea. And then did internal medicine just because it was kind of a broad field. And then in the course of doing that, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. But at the end of it, I worked for a couple years. Like I worked just in a VA hospital for a year, which was, just kind of like a regular job. And I could go home at night and I could live a little bit of a normal life, which I hadn't done for a long time. And I worked a year in an ER, which, was easy. You could go work 24 hours, then you'd have a few days off and you can go play. But during this time, I thought, well, I need to do something else. This internal medicine is not going to be good because it's a lot of older people with really chronic illnesses and lifestyle choices that you weren't going to be able to fix. And you would just spend all your time adjusting medicines as you kind of watch them go down the tubes. It just didn't appeal to me. And I think oncology appealed to me for three reasons. One, it was so measurable. So it goes back to the math thing. It was certain. There was so much certainty to it. This is the cancer. This is where it is. This is what the studies show can be done. And this is what you might achieve with that. And then if you have a cancer that's really advanced and the person's weak and ill and they're not a candidate for any more intervention, then at least like all the stones have been turned over. You've done everything you can do, and now you just need to, give them love, make them comfortable. And I always thought, well, this is a lot psychologically. Even though there's a lot of pain, it's a little less painful for the practitioner because you realize everything's been done. I always thought, wouldn't it be terrible to be a cardiologist and see somebody and, you've cathed them and you've talked to them and they say, no, I'm not having any pain. And you say, well, great, good. We'll see you back in 3 months. And then you watch them walk out to their car and you're looking through the window and they just drop dead right then. And I thought, oh, that would be hard. I want things better defined. And so that was one thing. And then the other two were just people that I met. Their oncologist, who was the head of our department at Medical University of South Carolina, had been a Hopkins transplanter, and he came to Charleston, and he's retired now, but was very renowned. Was a little he was a short guy, and he was a little Napoleonic, and he was always good to me, but there were a lot of people that, he really could rub the wrong way. I always just admired him, though, because he was so damn smart. Yeah, people would ask him questions, and he would actually think, and he'd say, well, the data would say this. And I think, God, this is what it's supposed to be. This is what medicine's supposed to be. And I compared him to a lot of the other professors I had who would give pat answers to everything. Oh, well, if that's true, then you should do this. And I thought, well, that can't always be true. Is there not some caveat here? Are there not some extenuating circumstances we should be considering? And they didn't do it. I don't know if they were just tired of doing it or maybe they just weren't as smart as him. But I didn't really love him, but I really admired him.
Yeah.
Really admired him. And I said that at a reunion. We had a reunion for the program one year, and they wanted me to speak. And I said, look, I'll tell you right now, we didn't all like you, but we really respected you. And I had a similar professor in medical school who I had an opportunity to work with for 8 weeks straight, and he was an oncologist. And also another really smart guy. So I think that was it was the measurement, it was the, we're not guessing. We're like, this is the cancer. Mm-hmm. This is what the studies show. This is what you can do. That was appealing. And then it was just the fact that I, intersected with these two guys I thought were two of the smartest guys I knew in all my training.
So when were you like, I'm an extreme sports athlete, I'm a slalom athlete, like this is my...
Oh, that was really in college.
Okay. Yeah. And then did you pursue...
No, when college was over, the last year I was racing, it was kind of weird. And I'd learned something about, not that it affects me now, but I learned something about overtraining. So in my junior year, I took time off from school, and I was really training. And, we were going into the trials. We were racing every weekend, and we were working out 3 times a day. And I was chronically exhausted, and I wasn't old enough to realize that I was overtrained. Mm-hmm. And so I would skip a workout, and I would just feel like, oh, no, now I'm getting worse. And I'd watch my friends work out, and I'd just say, oh, I got to take this one off. But now I'm getting worse. If I could keep doing these 3 a day, I'd be much better. And, it was really stupid. I fizzled towards the end of the year. And the following year, I don't know what it was. I had some schoolwork I had to do during the training season. It was like a senior project. So it sort of kept me busy a few hours a day. And it was really perfect because it gave me that mix.
Right.
Like I had something I was really interested in, this research project, and then I had training. And so I didn't train as much, and I trained much better. I mean, I got in much better shape. It was really, I've told I have sons who are athletes, and particularly the one that just got out of college. I used to tell them that all the time. I said, you're overtrained. Like, don't feel bad that you're hurt and you're skipping a workout. You need that. You'll be better. Mm-hmm. You'll be happier. You'll perform better. So then the last race I was in, really, or the last race was the national championships, and I almost won. It was a perfect day. Like the training had just worked out perfect, and it was a very long course, and I was just in much better shape. I mean, most of the people were not used to a course. The course was almost 300 seconds long. Now, races now are 100 seconds long. Mm-hmm. Most of ours were 200, but this one was 5 minutes of all out. And I was one of the few people that actually could do that. Yeah. So it was like a great day. And I sort of decided right then, you know what? I think this is a good point. Because I'm going to med school, and I got to go home and take physics. I have to take double physics this summer so that I can apply to med school. And so I didn't go to the final races. There was another series of races in Colorado that summer, which would have been super fun. Like, all my friends went out there and just drove around to these races. And, I was really sorry I missed that. But at the same time, I felt like, well, I've had this pretty good accomplishment, and life's more than kayaking. Like, I'm ready. I'm ready to take the next step. And I think a lot of the people my age thought I was just crazy. Like, well, what are you doing? That's so nerdy. Like, why would you stop doing this now? Why are you doing that? But anyway, it felt good at the time. But then for years, I always thought, I'd kind of like to be around that again. I'd like to go see it. I'd like to just get in that kind of boat again. It's because it's a specific boat. The boats then transitioned to plastic, and everybody had a plastic boat that was bigger, and they would just run whitewater in the plastic boat, and the slalom boats disappeared unless you were a slalom paddler. So I kind of dabbled in it a little bit. I was out in Vancouver Island, and I met this couple, and she was a racer for Canada, and she sold me one of her old boats, and I drove it back to South Carolina, and I actually paddled. I set up my own gates at this flat creek in South Carolina, and I just kind of got used to how it felt again, and I was in one race just for fun. And so that kind of piqued my interest. And then when I finished all my training and I took a job in Knoxville, which I chose because it was closer to the mountains, and I thought, I'm going to start. Mm-hmm. I did a lot of surf kayaking when I was in South Carolina. Different sport, but super fun and a super good release. I could drive to the beach in 25 minutes, and I could go hard for an hour and feel great and get back in my car and drive back home. It wasn't like a whole day project to go to a river, so it was perfect for my lifestyle, but it made me realize, yeah, I'm going to do whitewater again. And then I moved to Knoxville, and it was very odd. The first week I was there, I was at a stoplight, and an old friend of mine from D.C. was moving to Knoxville at exactly the same time I was.
That's funny.
And we ended up at the same red light on the strip in Knoxville. And I looked over, and he was smiling at me. And I hadn't seen him for, years. I was like, what are you doing? I saw the boat on the car. And so we pulled over, and we went into a bar, and we started talking. And he had been in kayaking all this time. He wasn't, he was a slalom paddler, but then he just became a whitewater paddler. He didn't care really about slalom much, but he knew so much about kayaking. He knew so much about the evolution of the boats, the evolution of the technique. Mm-hmm. The first night we stayed up till 4 a.m. just talking about kayaking. And then, we were friends. I talked to him last night. We're still good friends, have been for these 30-some years since we met again. And so that was really big for me because, he wanted to go kayaking.
Yep.
And he was a more social guy than me, and he went and met all the kayakers in Knoxville, and then we had a little group to run rivers, and then, and then I bought a slalom boat and said, I'm going to do this. His name's Kevin Sessler.
Okay.
They used to call him Bird.
Okay.
He just flew to Costa Rica yesterday with another really good friend of his, and somebody everybody knows who has been a paddler forever, a guy named Phil Coleman,
yep,
who has cancer now.
Oh, no.
And he's going through some difficult treatment, and he's got a son who lives in Costa Rica, so he's flying down there to see him for a few weeks, and maybe for the last time, I don't know. So, but anyway, that was, it's like everything kind of fits together.
Yep.
It's all just moves, and, and you cross paths with people, and things happen. And I was really happy that I went back and did slalom. I got to meet a new generation, many of whom are good friends of mine now. I just met up with a bunch of them in Nashville a few weeks ago. Just, great people. And I think you were mentioning earlier, you feel like you have so many weird friends.
Yeah.
And I think that's...
They're the best people, though.
Yeah.
It's
my kids say to me all the time, Dad, why are all your friends so weird? I was like, because they're interesting. I don't know.
So when did you go from being a slalom athlete and you kind of transitioned out and you moved back to Knoxville? And then when did you pursue like adventure kayaking or exploration kayaking?
No. I mean, we did some pretty difficult kayaking that we could do. I had a plastic boat and I would do that.
What did you explore around here in the Southeast? Like, what's some of your favorites?
Well, I mean, the the trips that stand out, they were not particularly hard rivers, but two of them were the highest anybody had ever run them. And I think I've told you about this before. So one I remember them telling me about, the West Prong, and these were all in the 90s sometime. So we went to the West Prong, and I was with a group of 5 or 6 people, none of whom were super strong. I mean, they just, they were decent kayakers, but you didn't want to be behind them in a tight creek. And so I just went ahead of them. Now, some of them knew the river. I didn't have any idea, but I said, I would rather not know the river than risk getting caught up in their broach.
Whatever that was.
Yeah, whatever that's going on with them. I just need to be in front of them. And that was a super exciting day. It was a really fun run. And we went back, just 2 of us went back the next year or later that year and ran it higher than anybody had ever run it. And that was a memorable day. And I actually tore my skirt open on a rock, and I was so relieved because I thought, good, I need to get out of this river.
I have a legitimate excuse.
I mean, there were no rocks. It was just this huge thing. That was a very memorable run. And then we did, Sean Smith and I did Daddy's Creek at a level nobody had ever done it before, and we did it in slalom boats. And he had had back surgery a few months before, like he was almost crippled. He had back surgery, and he hadn't kayaked since, and he just shows up and says, I want to run Daddy's Creek. And I said, it looks way too high. And he goes, no, we'll be good. Let's go.
We'll be fine. What could possibly
so
go
that
wrong?
was good. And then we did a similar run. Another friend of mine, Danny Inman, he and I did Piney Creek when the whole rest of the group wouldn't do it. They just said, no,
Is Danny related to Spence Inman?
No, not that I know.
Okay. I did a Grand Canyon trip with a local guy, last name Inman.
Really?
His name's Spence. I didn't know.
Not that I ever
knew. Is Danny from here, this area?
He's from Oak Ridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So.
Did you ever do like Big South Fork or any of that stuff?
Oh, we used to go to Big South Fork to train.
Okay.
We would go to the little narrow section that you drive in on the dirt road, and we would just go and we would try to spend 90 minutes on that 1.5 miles, just surfing and just moving around, attaining whatever we could do just to get tired.
So for people that don't understand, when you're like a 300-second slalom race, describe what that's like, because that's one of the most physically exertive things, like high-level kayak competition is like your heart's racing. Like
it's weird. You got to be aerobic, but then you also have to be anaerobic.
Right.
And so you're doing some technical strokes, and you're reading the water, and with timing of your strokes. But then there are places where you're just sprinting as hard as you can to the next sequence.
Right.
And it was only because of that training I did that spring that I was able to do that. And I was like still totally full on 100% at the end of the race. It's the only time in my life I've ever felt like that. And it was the coach I had my senior year was a Whitewater racer. It was a guy named Bobby Alexander. And
what's Whitewater? Like describe.
Whitewater is just racing straight down the river. So not slalom, not gates, just point A to point B. And he had been a slalom paddler, but he transitioned to Whitewater, and he just had no pain threshold. He was really a tough young man, and he could just go. And our workouts would be just out on flat water, me and him. And I remember Eric Evans came up and trained with us. He wasn't living in Hanover anymore, and it was, sprint after sprint after sprint for, 30 or 60 minutes. And something if I did one of those sprints now, I think, "Yeah, that's good. I'm going to go to call today."
I don't know. I had a hard time keeping up with you on Lake Holiday.
You did not.
Trying to paddle around the lake with you.
That is stupid.
How did you balance because you have 3 children? So 4 children. So when you and your wife had young kids, how did you balance your time outdoors in your pursuit of that and still manage to keep the family life? Like, what was your ideology?
Well, it was really just the first 2 years. Like the last time I was in a race, the last time I trained and went to a race, and this was just the age group nationals. So in my later years, that would be kind of what I was gunning for. Like, I'm going to be the old man national champion. And so it wasn't such a high standard. I mean, compared to the young guys, I was just an average kayaker at that point. I was 40-something years old. But compared to the old guys, I could win. Mm-hmm. And so I would really try to win that race. But my 22-year-old was just a few months old, or no, maybe a month old when I did the last race. So there wasn't really too much balancing. My wife is such a pure, natural, maternal person. It was, of course I was there, but, I wasn't required.
Yeah.
She really was a tremendous
Now, did any
mother.
of your children pick up?
No, it's kind of weird. They, my second kid, I think it was some sort of compensatory please dad thing.
Yeah.
And he was the most athletic at that point. My older son was athletic, but he had no interest in kayaking. And my second son said, "Okay, yeah, I'll do it." And he did it a little bit. He was competent. My daughter, when she got to be a teenager, learned how to kayak and, has done a few runs, nothing much, the Tuckasegee and the Nantahala. But last summer we all went there, and some of the girlfriends as well, and just had like the best. It was, I don't know what it was. It was just a perfect trip. And my 16-year-old had literally, and he's really, I married, for coordination, I married well. Like my kids got a lot of gifts from their mom that they didn't get from me. So my 16-year-old, who's the most coordinated, but not a very aggressive or physical person, but everything's easy to him. Mm-hmm. So he just decided, he was in a ducky, and then we were going to run the Nantahala, and he said, "Well, I'll just take the kayak." I said, "You sure?" He goes, "Yeah, well, that's a big deal." Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And he just went, he just looked like he knew how to kayak. He just kayaked down the river and would turn and, go through eddies. And he went over Nantahala Falls backwards and
it didn't float.
Smiled the whole time. And just, I watched him. I was at the top of the drop. I said, "Oh, gosh, he's going to get munched here." And he just, I would see him react. The boat would tilt a little bit, and he'd correct it, and he just went right through backwards and floated on down the river. So while I wish they had been kayakers, living where we lived, to do slalom it would have been ridiculous.
Yeah.
It would have been driving all over the place.
That might have been it, but I was going to ask you what's one of your favorite days on the water? Like, what's some of the high points that, like, oh man, that was a good day? Like, in all of your paddling and all of your adventures, what's like one of your one or two favorites?
Oh, wow. I haven't really thought about that much. Days that really stand out. All the days in the surf were good. Middle of summer, middle of winter, we would go all the time. It was always, because it was constant exhilaration. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, there was nothing. You just drove up and you got out of the car and you got in the surf. And so those days, and that was a time in my life where I was a little more free. So those days were all good. Let me see if there's some that really stand out. Had some, really fond memories of running the Cheat Canyon a lot when I was young. And we would do it in the spring, and it'd be cold, and then it would warm up, and by that time you were feeling a little stronger. I worked as a raft guide during med school because it was a good way to make extra money. So, and it was a good, get away from school thing. And those were some really good days. Those trips I mentioned were really good. I don't know.
What are some low points?
I don't remember ever being on a river and thinking. I can remember one time as an older guy, and this was maybe 10 years ago, and I was particularly bad shape then, and I was running the Ocoee, and I was like halfway down and said, if the car were here, I would just get out. This isn't any fun. I don't feel good. But it was just because I was in really bad shape. No, I don't remember any bad days.
Have you ever had any injuries, like paddling related injuries, or how did you, recover from those? Or
I had a bad injury about 30 some years ago on one of those upper branches of the French Broad.
And the reason I ask is because I think there's a misconception with extreme sports athletes or just athletes in general. Like, to the layperson, they see a whitewater individual or someone who pursues that, and they think this is just a nut job. This is just purely a nut case. And so if you had any injuries, how fast did you recover from them? And then how was it minimal to your overall?
The last year I was racing, I got really bad tendonitis in my wrist, and I had to take off a full 2 weeks with no boating. And, it was like in March.
Prime. Yeah.
It was prime time. Yeah. But I was young enough that I didn't realize, okay, I'm going to take off the 2 weeks. And I fortunately recovered completely. And I remember I ran about 8 miles a day. I thought, that won't hurt my wrist. And I would just go out and run every day. So that was an injury. And then this river running injury, I tweaked my shoulder one time, and that was months out of the boat. And it was really a concerning time. There was one time I was running the Gully, and I was just playing around surfing a wave, and I tweaked my back. And I have that back pain now. It's 31 years ago. So I just tweaked it a little bit. I was ahead of my group, and there were these easy series of surfing waves, and I was just playing. I was kind of exaggerating the movements, just waiting for them to come, and I tweaked something. And then I'd never had anything like that before. And then I decided, well, I'm probably not going to be able to kayak tomorrow, so I better kayak hard today. And so I just started kayaking really hard, and by the end of the weekend, I couldn't even walk. And then about 5 days later, I was better, and I decided to go run. And I was running up a hill, and it happened again. And then I was out for, 3 months or so. I couldn't do anything, and it was terrible. I'd get up crying in the morning like I was crippled. And then, but no, I've not had terrible. I had one terrible swim in my life, where I really did think I might drown. But
what happened?
I just swam, and the river was flooded, and there was even a guy with a rope, and I couldn't hold on to the rope because it was in the middle of a rapid, but eventually I got pulled to the side. I mean, I would have lived, but it was a lot of underwater time. You've probably had some of those.
Yeah, they're not fun.
Yeah.
What about what are some of the things that you would recommend to let's say someone just found whitewater, or they just found rock climbing, or they just found downhill mountain biking, or they found their thing. What's the mindset that they need to be in to get better quickly?
Some people are very naturally analytical, and some people are like my children, for example. They're not so analytical. Well, they're pretty analytical, but they're very good at copying what they see. Mm-hmm. They get that from my wife. They can just look at somebody do something and they can just feel in their body, whatever it is, a golf swing or the way to hit a soccer ball or move with a soccer ball or the way to kayak. They can just look at it and say, okay, this is how you're supposed to do it. Most of us can't do that very well. Mm-hmm. We have to have someone specifically say, no, your arm is too high or you're bending this the wrong way. Look at it again, and try to do it like this. So I think, some people can just do it naturally and some people don't. I think, there's no doubt coaching in anything. You do some coaching. I mean, coaching in anything is super great. And most younger kids aren't very quick to take to coaching sometimes.
Yeah.
They want to run. They want to have fun. They don't want to be stifled. They don't want to turn this activity into a chore. So they don't want to be coached. Some do, some don't. I mean, even the ones that don't, I think eventually will. But if you're talking about an older person that's going to take something up, yeah, I would.
What about in Whitewater specifically?
Yeah, I was going to say in Whitewater specifically, I think probably the majority of people who take it up at a later age just get too certain about bullshit that they're doing.
Yeah.
And they just think, and it's like you can't even say to them, really, this is how your stroke ought to look. You ought to do it like this, and it'll be more effective. And they just are resistant to, in my experience, not that I see many people or talk to anybody about this now, but I do often think that there are so many people who get halfway competent in Whitewater and then are completely uninterested in what they might change. I don't think you're not one of the, I don't think I would have been one of those people. I don't think you would have been one of those people, but you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking
there
about.
are tons of them.
Yep.
They just don't want to, they think they're expert at their level, and they're not.
The river doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care how good you are. Like those people tend to get humbled pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, I don't know. I think those problems kind of sort themselves out over a while.
But high level kayaking now, just sometimes it's so much. Like I can't watch the video.
Oh yeah.
I'm just thinking, what goes on in this person's brain? I mean, because, and I remember those feelings, those delusions of grandeur. You just think, well, no, if this can be run, I'll run it and I'll be fine. Mm-hmm. I used to have a thing, I never wanted to get out and scout. We'd get to a rapid and somebody said, we better scout this. And I'd say, no, you just tell me. And they would get out and scout and I would just wait and then say, stay left and then cut right.
My rule is if I can see the bottom, if I can see the pool, if I can see the bottom unobstructed, we'll just run it. But if I can't see it, I can't see the move, I'm like, okay, I need to get a look at this.
Well, my rule now would be I'm not only going to scout, I'm going to go ahead and carry the boat around as I scout.
I'm going to start carrying while you're scouting. Yeah.
Right,
yeah. What would you, how have you seen, what would you say about like the Whitewater ecosystem at Broad? How have you seen it change over the years? Just talk about the people and like it's the craziest community, but it's like 500 of your best friends.
It's interesting. When I started, a lot of the most avid paddlers were older people, and they tended to come more from the professional crowd. So there were a lot of people in the D.C. area who worked for the government or they were professors. The same was true in New England, I think. Mm-hmm. They tended to be people in their 30s or their 40s with jobs who were kind of stars in this little nerdy sports world where there weren't any real athletes. So they could go and be stars, like I'm a star here. And so when I came up, that's who we looked at. We weren't looking at many 21-year-old studs. We were looking at 40-year-old, halfway healthy.
Soccer dads.
Well, no, because they were just all paddling.
Okay.
But they were, they had some real job, and they
Yeah.
just did this on the side. And so there was that era, and then that changed quite a bit in that first decade because so many kids got in because of the Olympics and because of Deliverance, and a whole bunch of kids came into it, and a whole bunch of kids wanted to do slalom racing, and then it was a complete turnaround. And then by 1980, almost everybody was 22 or less. It was just all the competitive people became that young crowd. So there was that era, and then those kids continued to dominate, particularly the canoe class and the kids in D.C., who were my era. Some of them a little younger than me, but all, and they were all friends, and they all trained together, and they all became the best in the world. I mean, they were neighborhood friends who became the best in Europe, which is just bizarre.
Right.
And they had a great coach over there who I don't know if he coached so much as he just kept them, manly and organized and, driving. So there was that era. And then in the 80s, there was kind of and this is me just kind of half bullshitting, from the side, because I'm in my training. I'm not really watching it all. I'm just kind of getting a glimpse of it. But I think in the 80s, you started having a much bigger southeastern contingent. And that included some people that genetically were a little different than the guys from Boston and Washington, D.C. There were a couple, mountaineer types that said, shit, I can run that.
Yeah.
And plastic boats came. And, of course, the plastic boats were getting made in the Southeast. So then you had this group of people rise up.
The Woody Callaways
yes,
and the Shane
they started,
Benedicts.
Right.
Yeah.
They made it their life, but they had no interest in objective racing. They just wanted the experience. And they wanted the stories. They were more of a storytelling tradition. The people before were more of a, I don't know, standard or intellectual or, but then you had the South come in, and those were storytellers. That's what they did. They wanted to go experience something so they could tell the story.
Yep.
And they wanted to share the stories. And so that culture rose. And then that led to what it seemed to me like in the 90s was like maybe the early 90s was just a real explosion in the numbers, which is how then the plastic boat companies got to sell their companies at a premium because the investors, they were looking at this logarithmic increase and not realizing, hey, this is going to end. And so they overpaid for the companies, from what I understand. I don't really know anything specific about that. But, yeah, I've seen that. And then I don't really know what's gone on in your era. Like I said, I think the best people, you've had a kind of rising of the cream to the top, and you've had now people running the hairy stuff who are truly athletic to begin with and are really devoted to it and training and maybe less worried about telling the story and more worried about achieving this objective success, which is, as you said to me earlier, I ran this drop and I was the second person to run it. That kind of stuff where look, I just achieved something. Yeah. Look at that. Yeah. No, most people can't run this. I just ran this. So that's a success.
And now it's even gone to it's not just running the drop. It's running the drop and throwing a free wheel off of the drop. Running the drop in. It's like it's like acrobatics, aerial acrobatics plus extreme whitewater.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind. The next generation coming up is just so far beyond stuff I can wrap my head around.
I watch that stuff and say, does no one love you? Is there nothing? You just might as well do it because nobody cares.
It's impressive. I mean, it's impressive. It's just somebody looks at something that's already been done and is like, how can we make this? How can we make this more complex? How can we make this more aerobatic or dynamic? So.
And the slalom now is, you probably looked at it a little bit because we've talked about it, but Of course, the boats changed and they became easier to maneuver and easier to throw around, but the agility of the top slalom paddlers is crazy. If you you can go look at a video of the 1972 Olympics, which at the time we thought those people were pretty good.
Yeah.
I swear now it looks like you could put like your daughter in a boat for a week.
And she could be like,
and she could be, and not to throw anybody, because I was one of those people, not to throw anybody under the bus,
right.
But it really doesn't look that athletic.
Yeah.
And the boats were much harder to turn. There's a lot more, strength involved. But anyway, yeah. You know what's really cool about paddling? I've said this before, and I've talked to friends my age about this. It's as though, if you look just at paddling, it's as though you have experienced the history of the world. You've seen it go from nothing to what it is now, and you were there for all of it. Now, you can't say that about the history of the world. You can just read about it. Mm-hmm. But this little world of paddling, you can see it almost from its birth.
Yep.
And I say that, now probably an 80-year-old would say, shut up, you don't even know what it was like.
Right.
In 1960 when I took the Grumman down.
Yeah.
The Cheat
Amison
Canyon.
and I have had this conversation before, because his dad was a C1er from way back. So,
really?
We've had like this whole conversation of like what we've seen, and then he chimes in. He's like, "Oh, you guys don't even know." He's like, I was way before that. So It is kind of cool to see the development of a very isolated sport.
Yeah.
It's like its own little ecosystem, but you get to see its inception. And you get to see its development, and
it's really cool.
What do you want to leave people with? What do you hope to just?
Yeah, I don't know. I told you earlier I'm buying a new slalom boat just because they're cool and the ones I have leak, and so I hope I keep getting in the boat. I mean, up until 2 years ago, I got out 40 or 50 times a year. Mm-hmm. And I think I've told you before, mostly it was just this little solo attainment thing that I would do at Clear Creek. And then it had the one rapid in the middle with some stuff to do. But mostly it was the physical feeling of it was the nature. It was mm-hmm. just getting out and, being cold and feeling like a kayaker again. And then, I had to attain the river twice. And so I was really tired at the end. And it made me feel whole.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wow, listen to that song. That is great. Where's that payday bar?
Yeah.
Oh, I got a monster in here. Good. I was completely solo happy.
Yeah.
2 years ago, I decided that's probably a little dangerous for me now and pretty old. I was as much worried about carrying the boat to the river as I was in the river because mm-hmm. My balance isn't as good, so I thought, this is kind of stupid. I'm going to hurt myself, and I've got kids. I really probably should get back to that. Some people in Knoxville have built a
tell me about
slalom
that.
course.
Yeah.
So when we lived in Knoxville, I always had some kid I was kind of working with, some younger person, and they provided me with energy and enthusiasm and positive spirit, and I would provide them with, I'll teach you how to do this. And so we had kind of flat water, moving water gates on the Clinch River. And it wasn't very good, but it was something. And it was about 30 minutes away. And I used to have people tell me, oh, you should go look at the French Broad. And I said, French Broad is too wide and it's just flat. I mean, it just moves, but there's no features or anything. And people used to tell me, well, maybe around Seven Islands. Have you looked around there? And I said, no, and I'm not going to. Well, then last year I found out that one of the kids I used to coach, who's now in his 30s and has a PhD, he and some other, not really slalom paddlers, but whitewater paddlers had found this spot at Seven Islands Park. And there were two big islands with a chute in between them that when the water's full actually has waves has a few features, a few eddies, and they went out and set up gates. And then, so they did a GoFundMe, and we put all the money together, and now they've built this actual slalom course with multiple gates, and they don't have a lot of features yet. They'll have to add to that, but I'm looking forward to going there some this winter when I get this new boat, just to kind of be around it and feel good. And there are two former good C1 paddlers who live in Knoxville, and there's a third who was once ranked in the top 10 who is apparently moving back to Knoxville. So those three kids, I knew them all well when they were 15, 16 years old, and they're now all in their mid-late 30s.
Yeah.
And they may all start paddling together again just, because they love it.
The cycle continues.
Yeah. It'd be really good.
Well, I very much appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy. You've got a lot of stuff going on, so thanks for being willing to chit-chat. And I don't know. I very much enjoyed this, so I hope other people will too. But
well, I just like talking about myself.
Well, thanks for coming.
All right.